Hello, everyone. I am Jill Rockwell. I know a lot of you. I'm the Dean of Students here at the Batten School. We are really excited to welcome you here for Batten Hour today. We tried to have, if you ignored the chips on the table, which why would you? But if you did ignore the chips, you would see we tried to have a healthier lunch today in celebration of our inaugural Wellness Week at Batten. This is an event that's been in the works for since the summer. It was the idea of the amazing Nicolo Porto, who is our embedded CAPS therapist, and some of you have probably gotten to know him. And we're really grateful for the team effort that went into this week's planning, which includes students and our fellow teammates. And I'm going to have Nicolo do our introduction of our special guest today, and also have him share a little bit more about the week's lineup. So thank you to Nicolo.
Good morning, everybody, or I guess it's still morning. As Jill said, my name is Nicolo Porto. I am your embedded clinician here. I do want to make sure that you know, Jill doesn't know if you've gotten to know me, I promise you. So, but yeah, this is our first wellness week. We started planning this a little bit toward the end of last semester and really got into gear with it over the summer. Part of the reason behind this is as an embedded clinician, but also just like a human being, one of the things that we talked about was promoting wellness. We wanted it to be something that we could also be proactive about instead of just reactive about. Obviously, there is a time and place for therapy. That's why I'm here. That's why CAPS is here and why we do what we do. But wellness goes so much more beyond that. And so the idea of this week was to give us an opportunity to explore that and promote it a little bit more. So we have Nicole here for our Batten Hour this week or today. Tomorrow we have a cycling class at the cycling, I can't remember what it's, Soul Cycle? Zoom Cycle in the Barrack Shopping Center, and that's at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Wednesday, we have that evening, we have the cooking kitchen the teaching kitchen over at Student Health. They're doing an event there as well as a financial wellness program. Thursday, we are doing, Dean Solomon is doing yoga in his pavilion at 8:15 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And then Friday, we have rented a couple of courts over at Snyder, and we will be doing pickleball. And we've rented a lot of equipment and hope there's a good turnout for that. So those are just all different ways that we're really trying to promote wellness, in a lot of different areas, different facets of your life. And we're hoping to be able to continue doing this program, each semester or smaller events throughout the various semesters going forward. So today I have Dr. Nicole Ruzek here to speak with us, and I am just going to do a brief intro for Nicole. So, Dr. Ruzek completed her undergraduate work at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, and her PhD in transpersonal and clinical psychology from Sophia University in Palo Alto, California. Dr. Ruzek came to UVA in 2012 as a staff psychologist at CAPS. During her time at CAPS, she has held the title of Groups Coordinator, Assistant CAPS Director, and Director of CAPS. Last academic year, Dr. Ruzek became UVA's first Chief Mental Health Officer. During her tenure as director at CAPS, she oversaw a massive growth in personnel in our department, expansion of services, including our embedded clinician program. I believe we have an embedded clinician at every school except for the School of Education now, and Arts and Sciences, yeah. She also oversaw an expansion of our crisis services and the development of a crisis team, and led the transition of to our new student health and wellness building. She led our group during COVID and was instrumental in students' ability to get care from CAPS during that time. On a personal note, Dr. Ruzek's leadership and personality were big reasons I accepted this job at UVA and continue to work here. She supports her staff and looks out for our needs, knowing that we need to be taken care of if we want to take care of our students. She is a leader, a mentor, a friend, a skilled clinician, and perhaps most importantly, always makes us laugh. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Ruzek.
Thank you, Nicolo. That was a really wonderful introduction. And I am particularly touched. I'm honored to be able to come and speak to Batten, the Batten community about what I think is a really important topic, but also honored because I've heard of the lineup that usually comes and gives these talks. And I'm like, but me? Okay, I'll do it. But I think I'm particularly honored because Nicolo asked me to do this, and he's someone who's actually worked for me. So to have someone who's worked for me see me as someone who can offer some expertise in this area, I think is probably the highest compliment a leader can get. So I have a very full presentation today. I'm probably going to zip through some of it pretty quickly. So please bear with me, and I'm happy to stay afterwards and talk to folks if you have additional questions or if there are slides that I need to pass over. I also have some slides, and this is the first time I'm doing this, so please be patient, that ask you to take out your phone, scan a QR code, and fill out some information, and we'll see if it actually works and shows up in this presentation. All right, but before I get started, I wanted to just share briefly some of my leadership journey. So as Nicolo said, I am the Chief Mental Health Officer at UVA. I've been in this position since January. It's a brand new position at UVA, and I think there are only a handful in the whole country at universities across the United States. It's a relatively new concept within university mental health, and something that really is still being defined. If you don't know what a chief mental health officer is, you are not alone. It's something that is being developed and seen as increasingly important as we start to shift our perspective in college student mental health from really focusing on treatment to focusing on the whole community and the community's well-being and everyone's responsibility and participation in keeping students well. So as Nicolo said about Batten and this week, I think this is a good example. It isn't about just having a counselor available to you, when you're feeling stressed or distressed, but it's really about having different opportunities available for you to thrive and to feel well as you're navigating your education. So that is my current position. But before that, if I go way back, and I won't go into all the details, but when I started out as an undergrad, I was an English major. I had no intention to be a psychologist, and I had no intention to be a leader. But here I am today doing both of those things. And I think what happened along the way is I started to take classes in areas that were interesting to me, fell into psychology, got really interested in college students and the young adult, emerging adult period of life, seeing it really as a critical part of development and a real opportunity to affect some change in mental health. So started out at San Jose State University, then went to Cal Poly Pomona University in Southern California, where I started to do some research and kind of track different trends within college student mental health, and then came to UVA as a part-time psychotherapist. I was working about 20 hours a week. The groups coordinator at the time left very suddenly, so I started coordinating the groups program. Then I was asked to take on the clinical services operation, and then I applied to be the director, became the director, did that for 7 years, and then was asked to step into this new role. So again, I didn't have an intention to be a leader, but leadership opportunities were presented to me, and I thought, why not try it out and see what happens? And things, I guess, have gone pretty well because I'm standing here talking to you and giving you this lecture today. But I partly say that because I feel like a lot of well-being in a leadership role is really about yourself as a leader, who you are, what you bring to the table, and how you take care of your own well-being. And I'll go into that later on towards the end of the presentation. All right, we're going to try this out. So get out your phones, and I want to know a little bit about you. Come on, please work. Okay, just taking a minute to load. All right, so if you could scan the QR code, and there's 4 questions to fill out. All right, there we go. All right. All right, so it looks like most folks are interested in going into government, which makes sense in a public policy school. But then other nonprofit, this is really helpful. So something that Nicolo had shared with me when he asked me to do this talk, is he said sometimes, a lot of folks come in and give these talks and maybe they're responsible for very large corporate organizations, but that there are a lot of students who are interested in going into the nonprofit sector, or maybe smaller sectors where maybe they're going to have a kind of a smaller team that they're working with, or do more kind of local work, which is equally valuable and important. All right. Okay. Looks pretty evenly split there. All right. And yes, again, makes a lot of sense. So great. Yeah, so these all feel really, really appropriate. I think moving into a leadership role can be pretty scary at times, taking on a lot of responsibility, but also really exciting with regard to kind of the ability to have an impact on an organization and really to shape policies and culture in a way that maybe you can't when you're in another type of position. So awesome. This worked. Yay. Okay. Let's see if I can move forward. Ah. Okay. Mhm. All right, let's try this. Okay. All right. So, what is well being? This is a word I think that's tossed around quite a bit. There's a lot of interest in well being, but how it's defined is actually hasn't been great. There are a lot of definitions out there. Different people tend to include different components. But one area that I like to differentiate it from is wellness. So there's a lot of overlap, and the terms are often used interchangeably. I will probably use them interchangeably today, but there is a bit of a difference, and I drew this from Gallup's research. So wellness is basically described as being in a state that does not involve acute illness, and so really having enough energy to be able to get through your day and do the things that you need to do. So more or less, in a nutshell, wellness is about not being sick. Like you're okay, you're able to function. Well-being, on the other hand, encompasses a much broader sense of who people are and what they do, and is really a more holistic concept, which is more about thriving and flourishing within different contexts. And so well-being can include career, social, financial, physical, all these different areas, and the list could probably go on and on. If you were to Google dimensions of well-being, you're going to get a bunch of different models. Gallup focuses on career, social, financial, physical, and community, which tend to be really applicable to the workplace and work environment. So I drew from that quite a bit in thinking about well-being, but it really can include all aspects of what it means to be a human and to be pursuing things that are important to you. All right, let's try this again. All right. Self-love, food, peaceful, calm, content, rest, balanced, unselfishness, mental health, positivity, Zen, regulation. Awesome. Great. Let's see. Oh, good. That's the correct answer. All right. And this is what we'll be talking about today. So I'm glad we're all on the same page. All right. Okay. Okay, so why focus on well-being in the workplace, or why as a leader would well-being be important to you? This was a survey done by Deloitte they did a mental health deep dive looking at the perspectives of Gen Z and millennials on different components of mental health within the workplace. I highly recommend that you look at that report. It's actually really interesting, and they go into a lot of depth about different factors that are important to Gen Z and millennials. But I thought that this graph was particularly telling when they asked them, what are the top job aspects contributing to feelings of anxiety or stress on the job? And so these were the top ones that came up for Gen Z and millennials: long working hours, not being recognized or rewarded on the job, not having enough time to complete work, not feeling that decisions at work are made fair or equitably, and not feeling supported by my leader. So all really important things that I think will come to light as we talk about what promotes well-being in a workplace. But to me, when I look at this, a lot of this has to do with boundaries around work, expectations around work, and then a relationship with a leader that can hopefully help you to feel like your work is meaningful, that you're being recognized for what you're doing, and that you have a say in what you're doing. So there's increasing evidence, and actually this research has been done for a long time, that work is a leading cause of stress. And in fact, there's another statistic out there that says that Americans spend over half their waking life at work. So just let that sink in a little bit. Like over half of your waking life, you will be at work or doing activities related to your work. And so obviously that's going to be a primary driver for how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis, can lead to stress, particularly when it comes to commuting or dealing with different demands of a job. We saw a lot of this come to the surface with the Great Resignation over the last few years of folks, during the pandemic, kind of stepping away, reevaluating what their work life was like, and making different decisions about whether or not they wanted to return to work or the same type of work. Also, the quiet quitting phenomenon of workers deciding to put in the minimal effort instead of going above and beyond, because if they're not getting recognized or rewarded in the ways that they find is meaningful or important, why should they? And so really just deciding to do the minimum and then go home. There's also been increased destigmatization around mental health. Generally, we've seen this a lot in the college student population, where young people are just more willing to talk about their mental health concerns and seek help for their mental health concerns. So given that there's more awareness and more willingness to seek help, there's also an expectation that the workplace should provide help and support with seeking out mental health treatment. The pandemic also highlighted the work-life imbalances that a lot of people were living with, or those got exacerbated sometimes when they were working from home, trying to balance family obligations and responsibilities with work obligations and responsibilities was very difficult for a lot of people. And so realizing that the workplace maybe has some responsibility in helping people to find that balance in their lives. Organizations, I think this one is actually understated often or not highlighted, is that organizations and workplaces are a source of community. If you're spending, half your waking life there, hopefully you're going to a place with people who you feel connected with, a community that's healthy, that's not toxic or putting unreasonable demands on you. And so really being able to think about the workplace and organizations as a source of connection with other human beings. And then work is also a source of personal identity, meaning, and purpose for individuals. Again, when you're spending so much time involved in your work, hopefully it is giving you meaning and purpose. I will say this isn't absolutely true for everyone. And so I just want to name that for some people, that's not where they find meaning and purpose, and that's okay. But again, hopefully, if you're spending a lot of time somewhere, you are going to find some sense of connection with your values, with a sense of who you are. And what research shows is when people are aligned with their values and what they're doing, they're often psychologically more healthy. All right. And so why should leaders care about well-being in the workplace? I mean, we kind of see how it's positive for workers, to have a well environment or organization they're a part of, but why should leaders or organizations care about how their employees are feeling? It costs them money. I mean, that's probably for a lot, the bottom line is that there's lost opportunity when people aren't well. They are quiet quitting. They're not living up to their potential. They're not pursuing advancement in ways that would benefit an organization. Globally, this is the Global Wellness Institute, did research that showed that companies are spending a lot of money on turnover and lost productivity that really, could be spent towards other things to help their companies grow or to serve people. And so again, really the bottom line, when it comes down to it, it should be important to most organizations and companies. And so they want to be paying attention to this. And then research shows that when employees are well, that there's typically the potential for increased productivity, engagement in workers when they feel good about coming to work. They want to engage with their work more fully. There's higher retention rates. People want to stay at their job. There's some really interesting studies that show that when people feel like their workplace cares about them, they're less likely to leave their workplace. But if they feel like they don't care, much more likely to be seeking other employment, looking for other jobs. It enhances performance. It's also a good recruitment tool. And in fact, Gen Z and millennials, 8 out of 10 say that they are looking at mental health policies and support in the workplace and seeing that as a top factor for working in an organization. So I love that the younger generation is having a voice in this and is making a demand in some ways, saying this is important. We don't want to do it like past generations did it, where we put our mental health to the side and just push through. We really do care about being well and healthy while we're at work, and we expect our employers to support us in that. All right. So warning, the rest of this presentation is not going to be about nap pods, ice baths, or any other trendy, newfangled wellness opportunities that are out there. I'm not saying that those things aren't fun and interesting and helpful things to engage in, but I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin in talking about wellness in an organization or workplace. And I often use the word workplace because that's where most of the research has been done in this area, is really looking at employment and workers and kind of their well-being. But you could apply this really to any organization. So you can replace workplace with any kind of organization that you might plan to become a part of or already a part of. What I am going to focus on is really the organization as a determinant of health and well-being. And so it really being responsible itself for contributing to health and well-being by how it is organized or the attitudes and environments that it perpetuates within itself. And then how you as leaders or leaders in general can help to create organizations that are healthy and that are allowing workers and people who are part of those organizations to take care of their health. All right, so wellness programs. They're awesome. I don't want to say or communicate the message in this presentation that we should get rid of wellness programs. Actually, I think they're really helpful in a lot of ways, and they show a commitment to people thinking about their jobs and who they are beyond just the work that they do, but also taking care of themselves as people. But wellness programs simply are not enough to keep people well. There's about a $51 billion market, and I think this is telling and is a little bit of a warning sign. There are a lot of companies out there who want to make money off of keeping us well. Some of those ways are really helpful and do keep us well, and some of those are gimmicks and kind of distractions sometimes from other things that might be more important in promoting or sustaining health. So just keeping that in mind. When we look on a global scale at the wellness industry and how it's affecting workplaces and organizations, really only about 10% of the world has access to these wellness programs, mostly in North America and the United States. I think that's something to keep in mind, that there's a lot of privilege here. And in fact, about 80% of businesses that have more than 50 employees offer some kind of wellness opportunity above and beyond health insurance. So these are kind of prolific throughout the United States, but really we're talking about a really small part of the global market generally. If you look at the research, and there really needs to be a lot more research on this, there's really mixed findings on whether wellness programs that are currently exist in different employment sectors are having a huge impact. There's definitely some evidence that it increases kind of the perception of a company as caring about the employee, and that can have a positive impact on people. But when you drill down on some of these programs, and they look all sorts of ways, not all of them are always having a really direct effect on employees, and oftentimes aren't having an impact on how much money is spent towards healthcare or employment outcomes generally. And so there really needs to be more research on this and more specific ideas about which kinds of wellness programs have an impact, but just something to keep in mind. And here's the important point that I really hope to get across today is that employee well-being is largely determined by physical and psychological safety, really feeling physically and psychologically safe within your organization or where you're working, a sense of belonging and inclusion, that you belong there, that you are welcome there, and that people want you there, healthy boundaries with your work, that those are respected by your employer or your organization, feeling recognized, respected, and like your work efforts actually matter, that what you do is being acknowledged, and then having opportunities for growth within your job. These are the things that really help employees to feel well. And so promoting well-being is more about wellness programs and really is about the conditions of work and the setting that you are a part of. All right, so very quickly, where I'm drawing this from, and if any of you have taken a public health class at all or know anything about public health, is the social determinants of health. And so in addition to your genetics and your personal habits, sleep, nutrition, exercise, all of those things, all of these factors contribute to how well you're going to be. So you have some impact over that, but really there's a lot of things in your environment, your community, that have a really big impact. In fact, it's estimated that about 80 to 90% of all health outcomes are attributable to social determinants of health, rather than those individual things that I mentioned earlier. And I think this is a really important point because the narrative has largely been within our public discussions of health and well-being about the individual taking responsibility for their health, which is absolutely important. And it's a wonderful thing if you can do that and you have the time and resources to do that. But for a lot of people, they don't have those time or resources to do that because they don't have all of these things in place. So all these things really need to be in place to make a difference. And work, again, a place where we spend a lot of time, ends up being a key determinant of how healthy people are going to be. So I think this quote just kind of sums it up. All right. So this is a model put forth by the U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. My husband, I'm just going to be transparent with you, says that he's my celebrity crush. So I'm just going to put that out there. But I mention that because he's done some really interesting things in terms of thinking about health on a national scale. And the thing that I've really liked about him and why my husband says that is because he's focused so much on mental health, which I think has been fairly neglected within the health discussions and kind of thinking about global health. But he's really focused his time on thinking about mental health. One area, if you're interested, is he's really focused on the loneliness epidemic. He actually was supposed to come to UVA and talk about that, but unfortunately he got ill. He came back and talked about another topic, but I hope he comes back and talks to us about loneliness as well. But he's also done a lot of work on workplace well-being, and this is his framework for what he has found to be important to sustaining workplace well-being. And this framework was based on research that's been done, as well as conversations with industry leaders, focus groups with employees, talking with people in government and different nonprofit organizations. So really taking kind of a holistic research approach to thinking about what are the factors that are leading to well organizations? And he draws upon several examples. but came up, I think, with a really helpful model that is useful in thinking about an organization. The first thing I want to point out in this model is the very middle, which I think needs to be emphasized, that all of these things need to be centered on worker voice and equity. So it's really about people having some voice in determining what matters in all of these areas, but then also having opportunities to be able to share their voice. And so thinking about how to create an equitable environment where everyone can have a voice and share what's meaningful and important to them. But I'll go around quickly and just describe each of these so you have a little bit of a better sense of what they are. The top in purple is protection from harm, which I mentioned earlier is really about safety, both physical safety and psychological safety. If people do not feel safe at work or in an organization, they can't function. Their nervous system is going to be on alert all the time, and that's going to lead to illness. That's going to lead to absenteeism. That's going to lead to eventually potentially quitting or leaving work. And so people really do need to feel safe in order for any of these things to be able to take place. And if any of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the psychological literature, like at the very bottom there is the physiological needs of really just needing to be physically safe and taken care of. So really important. But I also don't want to discount the psychological part of that as well, which is feeling like you're in a place that's not where you're not going to be bullied or you're not going to be threatened or that you're not going to be at risk of being ostracized by other people in a way that makes you feel emotionally unsafe. The blue circle has to do with connection and community, which I mentioned earlier. So a workplace is a community. Organizations are sources of connection. And this is really where people find a sense of belonging often. Like they fit in there. It's a place where they go and they really identify with the organization and realize that, you know, in being part of a team, that they can work collaboratively and make change. The next part, the orange part, is work-life harmony. So this is the work-life balance type concept. But these two kind of factors that he talks about, one is autonomy, people really being able to feel like they can make choices in their work, that they have some ability to decide on what they want to do or when they want to do it. That's not always completely possible, but as much as you can give people choice in how they create their schedules or what kind of work that they want to do really benefits them. And then flexibility, being flexible with schedules. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a case example that I'll use in a minute. Mattering at work. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, but people need to feel like they are respected and that what they do actually has meaning and purpose. And so employers can help with this by recognizing employees, giving them meaningful work, making sure that the work they do is actually shared with other people as well, so that they feel like they're contributing to the larger organization. And then finally, in the green is opportunities for growth. So a workplace really is hopefully a place where people can get education and training and opportunities to either move up within their career ladder at that workplace. Or I like to often remind people that sometimes it's growing out beyond the workplace, and that's not always a bad thing. If people develop within your organization and now they're ready to launch into something new and different that's helping them grow, actually you've done a really good job as a leader at helping your organization and helping them to pursue their goals and dreams. All right, so my case study is CAPS. I can't go through all of these in a lot of detail, but I was thinking about, oh, what case studies could I bring in to talk about this? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to be vulnerable and talk about kind of some of the things that I've struggled with and I've done at the counseling center. So one of the things that I realized early on when I took my role as director of CAPS, which was almost 8 years ago now, was that people didn't always feel psychologically safe. And what was happening is we have treatment teams at CAPS where therapists and our case managers and our psychiatrists get together and talk about situations with students and get support. But what was happening within those contexts is people were coming in and kind of one-upping each other, kind of feeling like who can say the smartest thing, or have this really fancy conceptualization of what's going on. And they weren't sharing the ways in which they were struggling. They weren't sharing, you know, how maybe they might have made a mistake or an error that they wanted to learn from. And so I really tried to normalize that it was okay to talk about the ways in which you might be struggling with a situation where maybe you felt like you didn't do your best job that day when you were meeting with a student, and how you might talk through how you could do it better next time. And through that process over time, and it took years, but those teams started to be more open about those vulnerabilities, and more people started to say that they really felt like they were growing and learning from talking about what they were going through. But I, as a leader, had to set the tone to be able to give permission for them to be able to do that. Another thing that we implemented is a crisis team that Nicolo talked about. But we had increasing numbers of students coming in who were high risk, who were reporting, thoughts of self-harm or suicide. And we had some team members who would go home at night and feel like they couldn't sleep well because they were worried about students. They were, thinking a lot about, did they make the right decision about the treatment plan and those kinds of things. And so we created a crisis team that could really help our staff to be able to think through some of those more challenging situations and provide that support. Connection and community, kind of going back, giving people permission to talk about their mistakes openly with each other. I think when people are more vulnerable with each other, it builds connection. Making sure that there are team meetings and retreats where we're regularly connecting with each other, as well as social hours outside of work. Something that's that I've become aware of lately is that there were people oftentimes not attending our social hours at all, and we didn't understand why. And one of our front desk staff looked into that, and she found that some people didn't feel like they could do something after work. And so now we're starting to extend some of our social opportunities within the work time when possible, or starting at like 4:30, so that people don't feel like they have to make a choice between their family or socializing with their colleagues. Work-life harmony, I won't go into all of these, but CAPS has a very creative work from home policy that I'm happy to talk more about. I haven't heard of anyone doing it this way, but just quickly, basically, we give staff an allotment of hours that they can use through a semester to work from home rather than one day a week. This has worked really well in allowing people to be flexible with using those hours. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about the ability to be flexible in that way. And I've heard of a lot of other counseling centers who are doing away with their work from home policy completely because it interferes too much with student needs and student schedules. And so this is being creative about how to do that. Mattering. We have a big gratitude culture at CAPS. We probably do it a little excessively sometimes, but when I first started as director, I found that, again, there was kind of an intellectualism about the staff. People, often sounding very impressive, but not really thanking each other for the difficult work that they were doing. Knowing staff beyond their roles, I want to mention that one, that I think that is hugely important. I'm a very introverted person. I'm someone who doesn't go out of my way to socialize. I have to be forced to do that, which that's my growing edge. But something that I realized at work that was really important is that I needed to make personal connections with every person who was working under me. And when I didn't do that, I felt like I didn't know what was going on with them. I didn't know what was important to them. And then I feel like I'm disconnected and I don't understand their needs. Or then when they ask me for something, I don't always understand the context for why they're asking me, for the day off or whatever. So I think it's really important to know people beyond their roles in the organization. And then giving opportunities for growth. Everyone on the CAPS leadership team, except one person, was not on the leadership team at one point. And so kind of came up through CAPS, giving them opportunities to grow in that way. Our embedded staff, I think, is a great opportunity for them to practice more independently and kind of to shape their own program where they are. And then professional development, I think, is just really important. All right. So what is the role of the leader in all of this? So I use this diagram to show that as a leader, you have a direct impact on your team, who has an impact on employees, who has an impact on your clients, who are part of society. So really, I mean, it starts with you in some ways and can extend out. It's a ripple effect. So thinking about who you are, what you represent, what you bring to the table really can have a broad impact. Leaders set priorities. They have decision-making power. These are things you probably already know, but just good reminders. They create, inform, and execute policies and procedures. They have access to resources, and this was actually seen in the literature as an important factor for how people felt about their leaders. They saw if they had access to resources that they could do things for them that hopefully would help make their environment healthier and safer. Leaders are advocates. I think this is a huge one, really being an advocate for your team and being able to express what their needs are to the folks above you, but then also being able to communicate back down what the realities are of a situation, of kind of the expectations. And ethical leaders take well-being seriously, recognizing that the individuals who are part of an organization are part of something bigger than the organization alone. So I really think it is an ethical responsibility to be thinking about employees' well-being and an organization's well-being. So leader well-being is associated with leadership style or behavior. One study showed that when leaders were well, it impacted their leadership style. They tended to be more change-oriented and relationship-oriented, which are qualities of transformational leadership, which are very positive for an organization. Leaders set the tone for the organization. And so really how you show up, how you speak, how you relate, who you are is going to make a difference in how others see and relate to one another. You're expected to show up in times of crisis or need. And sometimes just showing up is huge. Just being there, being a presence, being someone who can be calm, who can be a point of contact, who can show some stability in the organization, is really going to make a difference in how people feel about being in an organization or at work. Leaders model what's acceptable. And so how you act, how you show up is going to show people what they have permission to do and how to be with one another. I could do a whole presentation on this one. Leaders are attachment figures and mentors. Really, attachment figures, thinking of, kind of like your parents. How would you want them to be? How do you want them to show up for you? Hopefully, they're going to be stable, secure, available, present. We don't always get that, from the people who are supposed to take care of us, but as a leader of an organization, hopefully you're able to provide those things. So again, that people feel safe. They know they can go to you. They know that when they're feeling uncertain, they have a way to talk about that and get some support. And people expect leaders to be psychologically healthy. There's research on this, that the expectation is already there, that you are already being seen as more psychologically healthy in some ways. And that's because you ideally have access to resources and opportunities that can help you stay healthy. And employee burnout is an organizational problem. It's not an employee problem necessarily. And so leaders need to be thinking about this, that burnout really, all the things that we talked about earlier are probably attributable to those social determinants of health, that it's the environment, it's the setting, it's the circumstances that really are going to contribute to burnout. And as a leader, you have the opportunity to leverage the tools that are needed to hopefully mitigate some of that burnout. All right, and I want to end on talking about the leader's well-being. Again, this could be a whole presentation, and I think it's really important, again, because you're kind of at the center of all of these things. But leadership roles, I mean, they're demanding, they're lonely, there's the potential for feeling like an imposter. I probably feel like one almost every day, like, how did I get here? Why are they trusting me with this decision right now? Leaders often don't receive direct feedback. I think this one is really important, is that as you move along in a leadership role, people aren't often telling you if you're doing a good job or a bad job. They're just expecting you to do your job. And so that can feel like you're kind of operating in a void sometimes. And hence leaders are also at risk for burnout sometimes. And so keeping that in mind. It's okay to acknowledge that you're struggling. And this is a point that I want to emphasize, and something that I have tried to do within my own role. I'm often getting up in front of my staff and telling them, this particular thing has been really hard this week, or this is a really challenging moment for us. I'm not sure what to do right now. Let's talk about it. Or sometimes even showing some emotion, with my team and giving them permission to show some emotion with me and to talk to one another about this difficult thing that we might be going through or experiencing. You are human too. Help is available for you if you ask for it. And I think that is huge. Like, you have to be willing to ask as a leader for help. Sometimes it can feel like I shouldn't need help because I'm helping everyone else. But in fact, we all need help sometimes, and it's okay to reach out to either peers or to someone maybe who is your supervisor or boss or a mentor. And acknowledging your struggle, it can truly have an impact. And there's research on this actually showing that leaders who are vulnerable have a positive impact on their team, and that when they share kind of things about their own struggle, then employees have an opportunity to talk about their struggle and are more honest about their struggle, and so that they can get feedback and grow. So what can you do to maintain your well-being? Reframe self-care as an investment and establish daily routines to take care of yourself. Know your limits and your team's limits. Maintain healthy boundaries with your team. Sometimes that really means being able to step away when you need to, or say that you're not available to do something, and that's okay. Stay connected with what matters, with your values. Remind yourself why you're in this role, why you're a part of the organization. Again, that alignment with your values and what you do is hugely important to your psychological well-being. Engage with the front line. This one has been huge for me. Nicola was just asking me, do you still have a caseload? A little one. And I have to keep a small caseload, or else I feel disconnected. Being able to still meet with students. I still run an interpersonal process group because I love hearing what students are doing, what they're thinking. And once I start getting too far away from that, I don't feel as good about the work. And I think I accidentally put this one in twice because it must be important. Manage your energy, slow down. I have to remind myself of this every week. It's okay to slow down, pause. It's not as urgent as it seems. Ask for feedback. I already talked about that. Have a life outside of your career and work as much as possible, being able to remind yourself of the other roles you have in your life. And connect with peers, other managers and leaders, and find a mentor if you can. It's not always possible, but I think if you can find one starting now and kind of hold on to that person when you start stepping into a leadership role, that will be hugely supportive. And most importantly, have fun doing it. Leadership is fun. I think there's opportunities to be able to laugh and connect with lots of people. So, and there he is again. But I really appreciated this quote. Organizational leaders, managers, supervisors, and workers alike have an unprecedented opportunity to examine the role of work in our lives and explore ways to better enable all workers to thrive within the workplace and beyond. So again, it's really everybody's responsibility. And you as a leader can set that tone, send that message, and make sure that everyone is on board in paying attention to wellness and well-being within the organization. And that's it. Thank you. I also have a million references, so if you're interested in those, let me know. But if you have questions too, I'm happy to take a few questions. I know we're getting close to the hour, our half hour. Yes, Jill.
There's obviously no one going to leave. No employer is going to leave if the team is very mentally unhealthy. It's to work.
Yeah.
There's some things that people look for that I think is healthy.
Yeah. I think that framework is really valuable in thinking about, particularly, is there opportunity for community and connection? Is this person who's interviewing me, or these teams that are interviewing me, curious about me, curious about how to connect what I can bring to the table to the organization's mission as a whole. So that's connecting, aligning kind of the values with the work. Are there opportunities for growth? And so kind of going through that whole schema or schematic, I think can be really helpful in thinking about that. I often share with students too that when you're choosing an employer, it's like choosing a person you're going to date. Like really think about kind of the things that you want to make sure that you're hopefully matching with someone who's going to be inspirational to you, someone who also can reflect back to you your own values, and someone who has enough in common with you, that you feel aligned. And so kind of thinking about, it's a relationship, a long-term relationship you're getting into. Yes.
So 50% of students look at government by 70% nonprofit. Are there anything that government doing for mental health that is nonprofit that can learn from others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know enough about the particular differences within those areas. But I do know that there's a lot of just attention generally, and I feel like this is still an emerging area. And I do, like I said earlier, what I appreciate is Gen Z and millennials starting to speak up more directly about those needs. And I do think that's something in job interviews or when entering an organization to be able to ask explicitly about those things and even participate. That was another statistic I didn't talk about, but they looked at the different generations and a lot of them ranked well-being as important to work, but Gen Z was the most likely generation to say they want to participate in making the workplace better, like actually contributing to it. So being a contributor to that process, I think is huge. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'll stay up here if you have questions or I'll be mingling about eating. But thank you all. I really appreciate you coming.